Organizations must meet some prerequisites before utilizing OneAPI. Make sure that your organization has a subscription to OneAPI and zIdentity. To obtain access to these services, contact your Zscaler account team and register the client applications in the zIdentity admin portal with the necessary scope and configure them appropriately. To access an API resource at first, we need to create an API client, and then zIdentity authenticates and authorizes the API clients to access the API resources. Let's move on the zIdentity portal and take a look at how to create and configure an API client. An API client refers to any application or service that wants to access the API resources. The API client acts as an identity that zIdentity authenticates and authorizes to access the APIs of various Zscaler services, such as ZIA, ZPA, Zscaler Client Connector, etc. And any application or service that wants to access the API endpoints of any Zscaler service must have an API client created and provisioned in the zIdentity admin portal. When an API client sends an authentication request, zIdentity verifies the client's secret or assertion depending on the authentication mechanism and issues an access token. The API client uses this access token to request access to the required API endpoints. To view the API clients, let's move to Integration tab and click on API Client. This page will showcase the details of all the API clients with the client IDs, name, and the status of the client. And you can edit the API client based on your need. To add an API client, click on the Add API Client button. Enter a name to identify the API client. Next, you have to input the access token lifetime, that is the validity of the access token that is used to access the API resource. Enter the time in minutes. The minimum and maximum validity periods are 1 minute and 24 hours, respectively. Next, enable the status. This allows the API client to authenticate and use the API resources. Under the Client Authentication Mechanism, configure any of the supported authentication methods, that is JSON Web Key or JWK specification, certificates and public keys, or secret view. You can choose to configure one of the keys along with the secret, if required. You also need to set up the same authentication method in your application. For example, if you configure JWK in the zIdentity admin portal, your application should sign and verify the JSON Web Token or JWT with the same key when sent for authentication. Let's select Secret as the authentication mechanism, then click Add. A key is auto-generated and displayed along with the validity period. The minimum duration is 30 days, and the maximum duration is 365 days. Copy the secret key and save it in your local folder. You can add a maximum of 2 client secrets. If you add a third one, the new value replaces the most recent client secret. So, at any point in time, there are only 2 client secrets. Please make sure to copy the secret key. Now go to the Resources tab. You can see the Zscaler services that are linked to your tenant and the available scopes. Scope is a mechanism that limits access to APIs. Let's select Zscaler Client Connector and a particular role and click on Save. As you can see, an API client has been created successfully.